Hello everyone, this is Stefan from Lush and Salty Aquariums. How are you? Today we're going to look at my 120 gallon reef tank. A little bit of an update, check out how everybody's doing in here. You know, I'm always got my hands in this tank for sure. And it's usually to move a piece of coral to somewhere else so it's out of the way of another piece of coral, because there's a lot of territorial chemical warfare that can go on, especially when you have as much coral as I do. Sometimes I'm removing coral that just after 4 to 6 months just didn't make it. I've heard this referred to kind of cynically as the orchid syndrome. It's like buying an orchid for your house. It lasts for a while and then fades and then you toss it. You could go through an intense amount of effort to try and resuscitate an orchid just like a coral, but I found once the polyps have receded and aren't coming out, or there's necrosis and a dieback and any other obvious signs of trouble, it's often just best to take the damn thing out. So I've done a lot of things in here that have worked out well, and some fragging, which is always a risky business. I cut a piece from this lovely gigantic leather. You see it's already healed itself, and soon that scar tissue will be impossible to notice. As well as I've taken a cutting of this cabbage leather, this neon green cabbage leather. I've moved the cabbage leather piece to here, and I tied it to the rock literally lightly with a rubber band, believe it or not. And once the piece attaches itself, I'll just remove the rubber band surreptitiously. I put that piece of leather coral that I showed you earlier from here. It's behind its mama. You see it's doing fine there. There's another piece back there. Leathers do really well in this tank. That's a different leather there, a longer tentacle. That's a different kind of leather there. They do well in this tank because there's a heavy bio load, which means there's lots of particulates in the water. It's just a little bit dirty, if for lack of a better word. That's from all the fish and creatures enjoying feeding them, feeding lots of live food, and it just creates nitrates, which soft leathers can handle and do well with. Other corals cannot. The fish seem to be impervious. All of my fish are gigantic for their species. This guy, it's got to be a half a pound. I've said it before, I got him at Petco for 20 bucks, and he was smaller than a silver dollar. That's a fairy wrasse there, a pintail wrasse there, a coal tang swimming by there, the iconic yellow tang going through the reef there. This is a new piece of leather. It looks like a finger leather. It has not opened up yet. I just attached it 2 days ago. You see the white epoxy. You can buy that at any good pet store, and eventually it'll get coralline algae over it and blend in, but you can tell that there was a project there, and I'm hoping this leather makes up for what used to be a fantastic yellow leather coral that's alive but diminished, and so maybe the two together will either one will prevail, or they'll both stimulate each other somehow, some way. I've got some zoas here, and these are a new colony I put down here below that elephant mushroom. These polyps are fairly generic, and they're all over my reef. It's kind of the dandelion of the reef, and now the nefarious weed of the reef is this Aptasia anemone, and I've got more of those than I wish. It happens. And I've got a natural predator in here that was just introduced to replace one that had passed away, a Aptasia eating filefish. I cannot find him. Hopefully, as I move around with the camera, there's more of the Aptasia though, so I'm hoping he'll get to that. These lovely green polyps are Paligrandes, and I have bunches of those. They're fairly expensive, frankly, and they grow well in my tank. I feed them by hand with little pieces of shrimp, and like a Venus flytrap, they literally eat it from your hand. It's pretty cool. If I could do that while holding the camera, I would. So here's a panorama. I think it's doing pretty well. I hope you agree. There's always something that bothers me about it, but there's way more things I love about it, and that's just the nature of this hobby. You're always trying to tweak something and make it better for your creatures, of course, but also, I'm not gonna lie, for your own ego. It's a little bit like playing God. I have to admit that metaphor does work. And when things are going well, you feel like you're in heaven. There's a torch coral back there. I've had trouble with these, but this guy is about a half-year old and still going strong, so fingers crossed. These are called gorgonians. They do well in my tank. They feed on all of the particulates that flow by them. You need flow, and you need that in the water for those to grow. That's another species back there. What they lack in color, they more than make up for in texture. This is a knobby variety. These are bubble corals. They're really cool, a little bit fragile. I have two, but they're like opalescent bubbles, and they will feed on pieces of shrimp. You just drop one on top of those bubbles, and they sort of draw it into the cavity where the mouth is located. There's our filefish. Now, if he does a good job, that odd-looking creature will eat those Aptasia. But I like him anyway. He's such an interesting creature to own, and I've had good luck with them in the past. All right, everybody, I'm gonna sign out. Here's to having a good week and a good life. Always keep your hands in the tank.